in the first 6 years of life. And so all of us are walking around with an enormous amount of data stored from a time which is, in some ways, we could say hardly relevant to today. And our reactions to the present moment are based to a large extent on what we learned decades ago. Just as I reacted to my daughter, and how she was playing with her food, not even based on my experience, not based on my parents' experience, but based on my grandparents' pain. And so if we want to align our values and our actions, we have to take a very close look at, what is driving the train, in terms of how we understand our world, how we interpret our world, and that what moves us to action. What are we acting? The Buddha described enlightenment as an appropriate response. It's like what? How do we arrive at it? One would not. I don't think any of you would agree that an appropriate response in the dining room would be to drop a tray on this woman's head, or to tell her she's, a big fat jerk, right? And it's probably not an appropriate response to tell my 3-year-old that she needs to eat as though it's depression, or to harbor fears that her parents, are in a depression. I have been blessed to live in a time of unbelief. There's been a lot of food around. We have not been hungry. That wasn't the case when my mother was growing up. But it's definitely the case my whole life. I've lived in a wonderful time in terms of if the amount of food is an indicator of abundance. I've lived in the U.S. in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and present day has been an abundant place. And my daughter probably doesn't need to feel otherwise, to feel as though she lives in a scary world where the rug will be pulled out from underneath her, the way that my mom might have felt growing up in the Depression and the pressures that my grandparents had. But in that moment, I was passing that on to my daughter. I was passing on the emotions that my grandparents had. And so that's not really what alignment of values and actions is to me. That's the problem that spiritual practice attempts to untangle, And it's such a beautiful thing, in that very same place where I did my meditation retreat, there's this statue of the Buddha, and he's in this pool, and he's just sitting like this. And he's just totally calm and still. Perfect alignment, perfect posture. And I learned during that retreat that what he was doing is he was watching for that square centimeter of opportunity where circumstance meets conditioning. And instead of allowing that to flower into a conditioned reaction, mental and emotional reaction, he was preparing himself to be the witness to the reaction, to reflect on the mind as opposed to reacting from it. And it is through that ability to reflect as opposed to react, to reflect with wisdom and compassion. That is the capacity that we need to be able to untangle the knots of our karma, to untangle our conditioning. Not so much in an effort to attack our conditioning, to judge our conditioning, to eradicate our conditioning, but to thoughtfully reflect upon it and to consider, is this an appropriate response for me in this time, in this place? Is my conditioned reaction to things right now going to align my values and my action? Or is it going to pull that, it's going to create distance? And that to me is what that statue is about, is developing that ability to be present for that square centimeter of opportunity to untangle the knots of our condition. And then there are things that may not be what's best. And the beauty of sadhana is that we learn to decide what's best, not relative to an external ideal. We learn to decide what's best relative to our own evolving view of what's beautiful and true, and our evolving desire to live it.